The air in the desert is dry and it tastes of time. It is not the time of clocks or calendars, but the deep, heavy time of mountains wearing down to sand. Beneath a sky so vast it swallows sound, sits a silent mountain made by human hands, the Great Pyramid of Giza. For thousands of years it has stood, a colossal puzzle box built from millions of stones. We have walked its known passages, marveled at its empty sarcophagus, and yet a whispering has always persisted. That we have only seen the waiting rooms. The real doors remain shut. The true heart of the pyramid, its purpose and its treasure, lies sealed away in darkness, in corridors we cannot see and in chambers we have only just begun to suspect. This is not just a story of stone and sand. It is the story of a secret hiding in plain sight, a riddle whispered from the age of pharaohs. It is the story of a modern quest, armed with lasers and cosmic rays, to listen to the echoes in the stone and map the silence. This is the entire story of what might be hidden inside the Great Pyramid's newly discovered secret chambers. To understand the mystery of what is hidden, we must first understand what we can see and touch. The Great Pyramid is not a solid heap of rock. It is a complex, three-dimensional maze built with a terrifying precision. From the outside, it is a smooth-faced mountain, though its gleaming white limestone casing is mostly gone, stolen to build the cities of later empires. Today, we see the rough, stepped core like the bones of a giant. The entrance, not on the ground but high up on the north face, is a square, dark mouth leading into the mountain's belly. This entrance, forced open by caliphs over 1,000 years ago, leads down a steep, cramped, descending passage. The air here is cool and still, heavy with the smell of ancient dust. The passage plunges deep into the bedrock beneath the pyramid, ending in a rough, unfinished chamber. This is called the subterranean chamber, a place of raw, jagged rock that feels chaotic and abandoned. For a long time, this was thought to be the pyramid's only destination, a tomb that was never used. But that is not the whole story. Partway down this descending passage, hidden in the ceiling, is the beginning of another path. This is the ascending passage, a tight, square tunnel that angles upwards into the heart of the stone mass. To enter it, you must crouch and climb. It leads to the very center of the pyramid, to what is called the Grand Gallery. The Grand Gallery is not a room. It is an experience. It is a soaring, narrow corridor that climbs at the same steep angle for over 150 feet. Its walls rise high overhead in 7 overlapping layers, each stone set slightly inward, creating a dramatic, vaulting effect. Walking up, it feels like climbing into the throat of the pyramid. The darkness is profound, broken only by the circle of light from a modern electric lamp. At the top of this grand staircase lies the heart of the known pyramid, the king's chamber. This chamber is built not from rough rock, but from enormous polished blocks of red granite, a stone harder than iron. The room is empty except for one object, a large, lidless box of the same red granite, sitting perfectly aligned with the walls. We call it a sarcophagus, but no body was ever found here, no treasure, no inscriptions, nothing. The air in the king's chamber is different. It hums with a strange stillness. Above this chamber are 5 other compartments, stacked like drawers, with massive granite slabs forming the ceiling of the room and the floors of the spaces above. These are the so-called relieving chambers, designed to distribute the unimaginable weight of the pyramid away from the chamber's ceiling. Their discovery was a shock in the 19th century, proving that even within the known pyramid, secrets were stacked upon secrets. Across a low corridor from the Grand Gallery is another, smaller space, the Queen's Chamber. The name is a mistake, a guess by early Arab explorers. It is a simpler, elegant room with a gabled ceiling. It, too, is utterly empty. But in its south and north walls, two narrow shafts, just 8 inches square, drill their way through the masonry at a slight angle, heading towards the outer faces of the pyramid. For decades, these were thought to be symbolic air shafts for the Queen's spirit, but they ended deep within the stone, adding to the mystery. Directly above the Queen's chamber, in the thick, solid rock between it and the Grand Gallery, is a void. We did not know this for certain until very recently. This is the first hint, the first whisper from the stones that something is wrong with our map. Because when you stand in the Queen's chamber, you are standing in a room that is, according to every traditional diagram, simply a room. But the walls around you are not just walls. They are the outer skins of something else. They are the curtains hiding a stage we have not yet seen. The known pyramid, with all its grandeur and emptiness, was always just the foyer. The real story was waiting patiently in the darkness between the stones, in the spaces we never thought to look for. For centuries, the pyramid was a silent monument. Its secrets were locked away. Its anomalies were just curious details for scholars to debate. The change began not with a grand excavation, but with a subtle shift in perception. It was the realization that to understand this mountain of stone, you could not just measure its corridors, you had to listen to it. The first whispers came from the tiniest of cracks. In the 19th century, explorers like Colonel Vyse used dynamite and brute force to blast their way into the relieving chambers above the King's chamber. They found not treasure, but graffiti, quarry marks in red ochre paint, the names of work gangs from the reign of Khufu. This was the first solid clue to the pyramid's builder, but it also proved that even these hidden spaces, meant to never be seen again, were visited and marked by the builders themselves. The pyramid, it seemed, had layers of privacy, and men like Vyse were crude intruders, breaking down doors without understanding the house. But the 20th century brought new ways of listening. It brought instruments that could hear the echoes of emptiness. The first great shock arrived in the year 2002. A team led by a French architect named Jean-Pierre Houdin and supported by the engineering giant Dassault Systems proposed a radical idea. They suggested that the Grand Gallery, that magnificent sloping hallway, was not just a ceremonial space. It was a machine. Its high, corbelled walls, they argued, housed a complex counterweight system, a kind of ancient elevator that lifted the massive granite blocks for the King's chamber ceiling into place. This theory turned the pyramid from a static tomb into a dynamic construction site frozen in time. It implied that the very structure of the pyramid held the ghost of its own assembly, that the chambers we knew were also tool marks of a forgotten technology. Then, in 2011, a small robot named Jetty did what no human could ever do. It crawled up one of the mysterious 8-inch shafts leading from the Queen's chamber. These shafts, long thought to be symbolic, were now being explored as potential pathways. The robot, equipped with a flexible camera, inched its way up the narrow, claustrophobic tunnel. After a long journey through sheer stone, it reached a blocking stone, a small limestone door with 2 copper pins on its side. Carefully, the robot snaked its camera around this door, The world held its breath. What would be on the other side? A secret chamber, a storeroom of artifacts. The camera's light flickered on, revealing a small, empty chamber, its walls rough, ending in another stone block. But on the floor of this tiny space, something miraculous, ancient hieroglyphs written in red paint. They were quarry marks, numbers, and symbols. More importantly, the rear wall of this space was not finished. It was rough, suggesting it might lead somewhere. The message was clear. Even these tiny, symbolic shafts were intentionally sealed with doors and rituals. They led to somewhere, even if that somewhere was just a symbolic space. The act of sealing was as important as the space itself. The pyramid was not just built, it was carefully closed. But the loudest whisper, the one that shattered the old maps, came from the realm of cosmic rays. This is where science began to read the pyramid's hidden diary. A revolutionary project called Scan Pyramids began in 2015. The scientists did not drill or dig. Instead, they used muon tomography. Muons are tiny particles from outer space, raining down on Earth constantly. They pass through empty space easily but are absorbed or deflected by dense material like stone. By placing sensitive muon detectors in and around the pyramid, the scientists could, in essence, take an X-ray of the entire structure. They were creating a shadow picture of its density. They were listening for the voids. In 2016, the stones whispered their first major secret. The muon detectors placed in the Queen's chamber revealed an anomaly. A large void, directly above the Grand Gallery. A hidden corridor at least 100 feet long, running parallel to the gallery's soaring ramp. This was not a known relieving chamber. This was a space with no entrance, no exit, no record. It was a sealed volume of nothingness, hidden for 4,500 years. The scientific world erupted. This was the first confirmed major unknown space within the Great Pyramid since the Middle Ages. It was given a cautious, clinical name, the Big Void. But in the public imagination, it was a secret chamber. The discovery proved beyond any doubt that the standard maps were wrong. The pyramid had lungs we could not see, arteries that carried no air, a hidden anatomy. The known chambers were just organs in a much larger, darker body. The void was a fact. Its purpose was a deeper mystery. Why build a 100-foot corridor and then seal it off from the world forever? What was it for? Was it a construction gallery left over from the building process like scaffolding inside a wall? Or was it a chamber holding something the builders wanted to protect not just from thieves but from time itself? The stones had whispered. Now the question became a shout echoing in the dark. To ask what is hidden, we must first ask how it was built. The Great Pyramid is not just a pile of rocks. It is a mountain engineered with impossible precision. It stands on a base that is almost a perfect square, its sides aligned to the 4 cardinal points with an error smaller than 1/15 of a degree. Its original height and the perimeter's relationship to the circle are numbers that seem to dance with advanced mathematics. This level of accuracy, achieved over 4,500 years ago, suggests the builders were not primitive laborers with ramps. They were master architects, surveyors, and engineers of a lost school of thought. Their blueprint was not just on papyrus. It was in their minds, a vision passed down through generations of a civilization that saw the world in sacred geometry. The traditional image of thousands of slaves dragging blocks up long, straight ramps is crumbling under the weight of evidence and simple logic. A straight ramp to the top would have required more material than the pyramid itself, and its footprint would be a monstrous scar on the Giza plateau, a scar that archaeology has never found. So how did they do it? The theories are as bold as the pyramid itself. Perhaps they used a spiraling ramp, corkscrewing up the sides, a road wrapped around the rising peak. This would explain the lack of a massive ramp footprint, but maneuvering the largest blocks, some weighing 70 tons, around tight corners seems a nightmare of physics. This is where the theory of the internal ramp gains power. The idea, championed by Jean-Pierre Houdin, suggests that the builders used the pyramid's own body as its construction scaffold. Imagine a straight external ramp used only for the first third of the build, bringing stones to a high base camp. Then, as the pyramid grew, the builders created a ramp inside the structure, tunneling upward like a spiraling highway within the walls. This internal ramp would have allowed workers to haul blocks in a protected, shaded environment, turning corners at open, internal notch corners at the pyramid's edges. Most startlingly, this theory provides a stunning explanation for the newly discovered big void above the Grand Gallery. Houdin proposes this void is, in fact, a section of that main internal ramp, sealed off and preserved forever when the construction was complete. It is the fossilized track of the builder's path, a snapshot of the moment the last block was laid and the tunnel was closed. If this is true, then what we are discovering are not treasure chambers, but the ghostly footprints of the construction crew. The pyramid contains its own instruction manual, written in empty space. But the construction is only half the mystery. The other half is the stone itself. The limestone blocks of the core came from nearby quarries, but the granite, the hard, beautiful red granite of the king's chamber, the sarcophagus, and the relieving chambers, came from over 500 miles away in Aswan. How did they move 70-ton blocks of granite on wooden sleds across the desert and up the Nile? Experiments show it was possible with wet sand to reduce friction, with teams of organized laborers, with a society capable of monumental logistics. But the final act of placing these blocks, of hoisting them to the very heart of the pyramid and setting them with hair's breadth accuracy, remains a feat that modern engineers still struggle to fully explain. These were not just builders. They were time travelers. They built for a time scale we can hardly comprehend. They understood settling, stress, and distribution of weight so well that their structure has survived earthquakes that toppled cities. The 5 relieving chambers above the king's chamber are a masterpiece of insurance, spreading the immense load of the pyramid's peak, so that the ceiling of the king's chamber would not collapse for millennia. They built knowing they would die long before the capstone was set. They built for eternity, and in the darkness of the internal ramp, the big void, we may be witnessing the ultimate act of their craft. Not just the building of a tomb, but the deliberate burial of their own methods. They sealed their secrets inside the monument, perhaps believing that the how of its creation was as sacred as the why. The void is not empty. It is filled with the echo of chisels, the ghost of ropes straining, the silent memory of 1,000 forgotten voices singing a work song that has not been heard for 45 centuries. The precision of the Great Pyramid is a language we are still learning to read. It speaks in angles and alignments, in numbers that seem to whisper of a knowledge beyond mere tomb building. This has led generations of researchers down a fascinating, often controversial path. The search for the pyramid's encoded message. Was it just a pharaoh's tomb, or was it something more? A repository of ancient science, a monument built to mirror the very heavens or the shape of the earth itself. The idea of hidden chambers then takes on a new, electrifying dimension. Perhaps what is concealed is not gold or a missing mummy, but knowledge, a time capsule of a civilization's lost wisdom. Consider the numbers. The pyramid's original height multiplied by a specific number gives you roughly the polar radius of the Earth. The perimeter of its base relates to the equatorial circumference with a similar, startling closeness. The angle of its descending passage once pointed directly at the pole star of its era, Alpha Draconis, a sentinel in the northern sky. The narrow shafts from the king's chamber aligned with key stars in the Egyptian afterlife, Orion's belt for Osiris, and the northern circumpolar stars for the eternal, undying realm. This is not random. It is a three-dimensional map, a stone model of the cosmos and the world, frozen at a specific moment in time. So, if the known chambers and shafts form a celestial map, what do the hidden spaces represent? Could the newly discovered Big Void and other anomalies be part of a symbolic architecture we no longer understand? Perhaps they correspond to constellations lost to history, or to sacred proportions of the human body, or the landscape of Egypt itself. Some researchers, looking at the arrangement of the three main pyramids of Giza, see a perfect mirror of the three stars of Orion's belt on the ground. If that pattern holds, then the Great Pyramid itself might have internal features mirroring other celestial bodies. A hidden chamber in this view might be the star on the map, a symbolic resting place not for a body, but for a soul navigating the afterlife. This idea of the pyramid as a machine for the afterlife is powerful. The ancient Egyptians believed the dead pharaoh became Osiris, the god of rebirth, and would journey through the Jewat, the starry underworld, to be resurrected. The pyramid texts, spells carved inside later pyramids, describe this perilous journey. The Grand Gallery, with its soaring height, could represent the soaring ascent of the soul. The king's chamber, the place of resurrection. But what of the subterranean chamber cut deep into the bedrock? It might represent the underworld itself, and the mysterious Big Void. If it runs above the Grand Gallery, perhaps it is the Upper Jewat, a higher celestial pathway reserved for the most perfected souls, a secret highway to the stars that was too sacred to even depict or access. Theories also point to acoustic properties. The granite coffer in the king's chamber, if struck, rings with a peculiar tone. The shape of the Grand Gallery might amplify specific sound frequencies. Was the pyramid designed to resonate, to create a specific vibrational environment for a ritual or transformation? Could a hidden chamber be a kind of resonance chamber, designed to amplify these sacred sounds? Frequencies meant to facilitate the pharaoh's journey or communicate with the divine. A sealed space, untouched by outside air, would preserve its acoustic properties perfectly. Then there is the most tantalizing idea of all, the Hall of Records. This is a legend spoken of by ancient historians and embraced by modern mystics, that somewhere beneath the sands of Giza lies a vast archive, the Hall of Records. It is said to contain the lost knowledge of Atlantis, the true history of humanity, and the wisdom of a civilization that preceded dynastic Egypt. While often associated with the Sphinx, many believe the Great Pyramid is the true guardian. Could the Big Void or other, deeper anomalies detected by scans be part of this haul? Not a room filled with gold, but with alabaster tablets, crystal libraries, or artifacts of a technology we would scarcely recognize. This search for meaning turns every shadow on a muon scan into a potential symbol. The pyramid becomes a book in a language of stone and space. The empty known chambers are the clear, simple sentences. The hidden voids are the encrypted chapters, the advanced lessons. The builders did not just want to hide a body. They wanted to preserve a blueprint for immortality, a map of the cosmos, and a test for future generations. To find a hidden chamber would not just be an archaeological discovery. It would be like finding the key to a code, allowing us to finally read the full message they carved, not on the walls, but in the very bones of the mountain they built. The silence from those voids is not empty. It is the silence of a teacher waiting for the student to ask the right question. The 21st century did not bring picks and shovels to the Great Pyramid. It brought silent listening machines. The era of blasting through stone with dynamite, of crude holes and shattered archaeology is over. A new kind of explorer now walks the Grand Gallery, carrying not torches but tablets. There light the cool glow of data on a screen. These are the digital tomb raiders, and their weapons are particles from space, lasers that paint reality in 3 dimensions, and radar that can see through the skin of the world. Their quest is to map the silence, to make a picture of the unknown without touching a single stone. The leader of this quiet revolution is the Scan Pyramids Project, an international team of scientists from Egypt, France, Japan, and Canada. Their first major tool was the muon detector, but that was only the beginning. Muon tomography is like feeling the shape of an object by holding it up to a light source 100 miles away. The particles that pass through paint a shadowgraph of density. The Big Void, announced in 2017, was a shadow so large and clear it could not be ignored. But science demands more than one shadow. It demands proof from multiple angles, a chorus of whispers saying the same thing. So the team employed other silent listeners. Infrared thermography came next. This technique uses sensitive cameras to read the surface temperature of the pyramid's stones at different times of day. As the sun heats the massive structure, the stones warm and cool at different rates. A stone that is thicker, or one that has an empty space behind it, will have a different thermal signature than a solid block. During a scan in 2016, the thermal cameras revealed several intriguing thermal anomalies. One, on the eastern side of the pyramid near the ground, showed 3 adjacent stones that were significantly hotter than the rest. This could indicate a small void or a different composition behind them, a potential hidden entrance or a construction feature lost to time. Most compellingly, a scan of the northern face, right around the known entrance, revealed a striking temperature differential in the shape of a smaller, pyramid-shaped patch. It was as if the stones there were hiding a secret shape beneath their surface, a ghost of an earlier design or a plugged passageway. Then came the cosmic ray muon detectors, placed in more locations to triangulate the void. Japanese teams from Nagoya University and KEK installed electronic emulsion films and gas detectors in the Queen's chamber and the descending corridor. These devices, painstakingly analyzed over months, not only confirmed the big void above the grand gallery but began to sketch its edges. The data suggested it was not a single chamber, but a corridor-like structure over 100 feet long, with a cross-section similar to the grand gallery itself. It seemed to be a twin, a hidden sibling running parallel to the known masterpiece. The scans also hinted at a smaller, separate void behind the chevrons, the giant inverted V-shaped stones above the original entrance on the north face. This area had long been a focus of speculation, as its construction is unique and seems to serve as a massive, sophisticated relieving structure. The muons whispered that the chevrons might be shielding more than just stress. They might be guarding a space. The most detailed picture, however, comes from 3D laser scanning. Every inch of the interior passages, every chip in the granite coffer, every subtle irregularity in the grand gallery's corbelled walls has been captured in perfect digital detail. This creates a flawless baseline map. When you combine this perfect model of the known with the shadow pictures from muons and the heat maps from thermography, you get a ghost image, a photograph of what is missing. The digital explorers can now fly through a simulation of the pyramid, passing through solid stone to hover in the center of the big void. They can measure its approximate volume, its orientation, its relationship to every known feature. They can see, in theory, where its walls might be. They have found the locked door. Now they are trying to see the lock, but this creates a profound dilemma. Knowing something is there is one thing, reaching it is another. The ethos of this new archaeology is non-invasive. The goal is to preserve, not to plunder. How do you peer into a sealed chamber that has been untouched for millennia without breaking its seal? Ideas are being tested. Fiber optic cameras thin enough to slip through a natural crack, or a drilled hole the width of a needle. Micro robots that could navigate dust without disturbing it. Resonant frequency scans that could feel the shape of the void by sending vibrations through the stone. The pyramid is being treated like a precious, ancient patient, and the scientists are doctors using the most advanced imaging to diagnose its secrets without making a single cut. They are caught between a burning need to know and a solemn duty to protect. Every pulse of data from a muon detector is a step closer to understanding, and a step deeper into an ethical labyrinth. What if they find a way to look and see something that changes everything? What if in that dark, dry space something looks back? Every discovery casts a longer shadow. As the digital maps grow more detailed, the silence from the hidden spaces grows louder, more demanding. This is no longer just an archaeological puzzle. It is a confrontation with history itself, and history is a territory guarded by ghosts both ancient and modern. The quest to understand the Great Pyramid's secrets is now entangled in a complex web of national pride, academic rivalry, and the heavy legacy of colonialism. To drill a hole to send a camera into the darkness is not just a scientific decision. It is a political act, a gesture weighed down by centuries of exploitation. For Egypt, the pyramids are more than monuments. They are the bedrock of national identity, a proof of civilization's endurance, and the heart of a vital tourism industry that feeds millions. The Egyptian Ministry of Antiquities holds the keys, both literal and figurative. They are the guardians of a legacy that was, for too long, plundered by outsiders. The 19th and early 20th centuries saw a parade of European adventurers and scholars who treated Egypt as a giant museum without a curator, shipping treasures to London, Paris, and Berlin. The echoes of that extraction still resonate in the halls of the British Museum and the Louvre. Today, Egypt fiercely protects its sovereignty over its past. Any new exploration, especially one targeting the crown jewel of Giza, is scrutinized with immense caution. The question is not just what will we find, but who will control the narrative, who will own the discovery. This tension simmers beneath the surface of every scientific collaboration. The Scan Pyramids project is a diplomatic tightrope walk. The foreign scientists bring dazzling technology, but they operate under the watchful eyes of Egyptian authorities. Every press release, every announcement of a new anomaly is carefully coordinated. The initial fanfare around the Big Void was followed by a period of official skepticism, a call for more data, a reassertion of control. Some within Egypt's archaeological establishment represent a more traditional school of thought, one that views the pyramid fundamentally as a tomb for Khufu. Proposals of hidden chambers or lost halls of records can be seen as sensational, even disrespectful, distractions from the established understanding of the monument. They fear the pyramid becoming a playground for fringe theories and treasure hunters, its dignity lost in a media circus. The ethics of intrusion loom large. Imagine a sealed chamber, perfectly preserved for 45 centuries. The air inside is ancient, unchanged, possibly containing traces of pollen, wood smoke, or organic materials that would vanish in an instant if exposed to modern air. A robot camera with its lights and mechanical whirring would be an alien invasion. Dust settled for millennia would swirl at its passage. There is a sacredness to that separation. To break it is an irreversible act. What if the chamber is empty? The anticlimax could be profound. But what if it contains something fragile, something meant never to be seen? A textile, a papyrus, a ritual object. These could crumble to nothing when the microclimate that sustained them is shattered by a fiber optic thread of light. The debate divides archaeologists. Are we stewards preserving a sealed time capsule for a future with better technology? Or are we explorers with a duty to knowledge, obligated to look now because we finally can? Furthermore, the world watches with a hunger that is often unhelpful. Media outlets crave the story of a hidden treasure chamber, a pharaoh's gold, a crystal skull. This pressure can distort the slow, meticulous work of science. It can lead to rushed announcements, exaggerated claims, and a public disappointment that then starves genuine research of support. The digital tomb raiders must fight not just technical challenges, but the specter of Indiana Jones, the ghost of a fantasy that simplifies the past into a chase for loot. They are trying to listen to a whisper while the world shouts for a roar. So the scans continue, accumulating data pixel by pixel. Permissions are sought, committees debate, and the pyramid waits. It has waited under the desert sun through dynasties, invasions, and revolutions. It can wait a little longer. The weight of the past tells us that every action has a consequence. To open a door closed by the ancients is to accept a responsibility they may have never imagined. The responsibility to the truth, to preservation, and to the silent agreement we make with history to treat its deepest secrets not as prizes to be won, but as conversations to be joined with humility and care. The stones have kept their secret this long. They will decide when and if the time is right to reveal it. Data in its raw form is cold. It is a scatter plot of points, a heat map of colors, a graph of particle counts. But in the hands of those who know how to listen, data begins to sing. The muon shadows and thermal whispers from the Great Pyramid are now being woven together into a chorus, and the song they are singing describes a shape in the darkness. The big void is no longer just an idea. It has dimensions, a personality. It is a corridor of nothingness that holds a universe of questions. Scientists, using the combined power of their tools, have begun to trace its outline. It runs for at least 100 feet, directly above the Grand Gallery, mirroring its incline. Its cross-section appears to be similar, suggesting it might be a twin gallery, a hidden echo of the majestic one below. But why? What purpose could a grand hallway serve if no one was ever meant to walk it? The theories spiral from the practical to the profound. The construction ramp theory is the most grounded. This hidden corridor could be the final, sealed-off section of the internal ramp used to haul the largest granite blocks to the apex of the pyramid's interior. Once the last keystone was set in the relieving chambers, the builders would have backed out, filling the ramp behind them as they went, until this final segment was left as a hollow relic, a fossilized artery of the build. If true, it is an archaeological miracle, a pristine snapshot of Bronze Age engineering, a secret blueprint preserved in negative space. To peer inside would be to witness the tool marks and maybe even the footprints of the builders, frozen in the dust of their last day on the job. But the void's perfect alignment with the Grand Gallery nags at the imagination. In a structure where every angle seems symbolic, a coincidence is hard to accept. Could this be a spirit gallery? In Egyptian belief, the dead pharaoh became a celestial being, an Ak, a glorious spirit that could travel between worlds. The Grand Gallery, with its soaring height, is often seen as a physical representation of this ascent. Perhaps the hidden void above it is the next stage, the Ak Gallery, a purely spiritual counterpart for the king's essence to traverse after his physical resurrection in the king's chamber below. It would be a space built not for the body, nor even for the Ba, the soul, but for the most perfected divine aspect of the pharaoh. A chamber for a god, not a man. Then there are the smaller anomalies, the thermal hotspot near the eastern base and the curious void suggested behind the massive chevrons on the north face. These hint that the pyramid's secrets may not be centralized but distributed, a network of hidden spaces. The chevrons, those unique angled stones above the original entrance, are architectural marvels in themselves, acting as a giant shock absorber. The muon data hinting at a space behind them is tantalizing. Could it be a construction niche? A small dedicatory chamber holding foundation deposits, tools, ritual offerings, or a model of the king's tools? Or, more intriguingly, could it be a kind of time capsule chamber, intended by the architect Hemianu to hold the true plans of the pyramid, the sacred geometry that guided its construction, sealed behind the most robust part of the structure? Each possibility changes the emotional texture of the search. A construction ramp is exciting to an engineer. A spirit gallery is profound to a historian of religion. A time capsule of knowledge is a siren song for all of humanity. The emptiness begins to feel crowded with ghosts of meaning. The void is not passive. It is an actor in the pyramid's story, playing a role we have yet to understand. Its very existence challenges the tomb theory at its core. If the pyramid's primary function was to house a body and its goods, why invest incomprehensible effort in building and then perfectly sealing a gigantic, inaccessible space that the dead pharaoh could never use? This hidden architecture suggests the pyramid's function was multidimensional, part tomb, part resurrection machine, part cosmic landmark, and part sealed archive of its own creation myth. The echo from the emptiness, then, is a question about human ambition. It asks us, what do we build for when we build for eternity? Is it for memory, for glory, for God, or for a future we will never see? The builders of the Great Pyramid invested in a future so distant it is our past. They buried their greatest efforts where no contemporary eye could see them, trusting that the structure itself was the message, and that the hidden parts were the most important syllables. As we stand with our muon detectors, we are that future. We are the ones they built for, the ones finally hearing the faint echo from the sealed chamber. The responsibility is terrifying. To look is to fulfill a destiny laid down in stone 4,500 years ago. To turn away is to ignore a call across the ages. The echo grows louder. It is no longer just a sound. It is an invitation. The pyramid has always been a mirror, reflecting not only the stars but the hopes and fears of those who stand before it. For every scientist with a muon detector, there is a dreamer with a theory, a believer seeing symbols in the stone, a storyteller weaving narratives in the spaces between data points. This shadow world of alternative research, of passionate amateurs and iconoclastic thinkers, exists in a tense, often dismissive, but sometimes surprisingly fruitful dialogue with the world of academic archaeology. They are the other set of listeners, hearing a different song in the same silence. Some of these dreamers look at the pyramid and see not just a tomb, but a machine. They point to the strange, resonant properties of the granite coffer, the precise mathematical constants seemingly encoded in its dimensions, and the peculiar electromagnetic properties detected in the king's chamber. They theorize that the pyramid was a power plant, using the flow of water from the Nile through subterranean passages and the piezoelectric properties of its granite to generate energy. Or a communication device focusing telluric currents or cosmic energies. In these visions, the hidden chambers are not rooms but capacitors, resonators, or waveguides, functional components of a technology we have forgotten how to see. The big void becomes a critical resonance chamber or a waveguide for energy meant to be transmitted skyward, towards the constellation of Orion. These ideas are often met with sharp skepticism from mainstream Egyptologists, who see no evidence of tool marks, wiring, or wear consistent with machinery. Yet the dreamers persist, asking a provocative question. If an ancient civilization did possess a sophisticated technology built from stone and geometry, not silicon and steel, how would we recognize it? Then there are the historical mystics, drawing on the words of ancient travelers. The Greek historian Herodotus, writing centuries after the pyramid's construction, recorded a tale told to him by Egyptian priests. They spoke of hidden underground chambers on the Giza plateau, built by the founder Khufu to hold his treasure. The Arab chronicler al-Masudi in the 10th century wrote of a legend that the pyramid contained statues of artificial stone, instruments of iron which do not rust, and glass which could be bent without breaking. These accounts, written off as fantasy for generations, now take on a new glimmer in the light of thermal anomalies and subsurface radar scans that hint at unexplored cavities beneath the plateau. Could these be the faded memories of real, now lost knowledge? The dreamers argue that our modern scientific arrogance dismisses oral history and myth at our peril, that these stories are the cultural echo of a truth since buried. Most prominent among the dreamers are those who champion the Hall of Records. Popularized by the psychic Edgar case in the early 20th century, this idea claims that a vast archive from the lost civilization of Atlantis lies buried somewhere at Giza, waiting to be discovered. This hall is said to contain crystal tablets, ancient records, and technological artifacts that would rewrite human history. For believers, every new void discovered by scanned pyramids is a potential candidate. The big void is too high, they might argue. The real hall must be in the bedrock, beneath the Sphinx or the pyramid itself, connected by undiscovered tunnels. This idea fuels endless speculation and has led to private, often controversial expeditions using ground-penetrating radar, convinced they are on the brink of the ultimate revelation. The academic gatekeepers view this landscape with deep unease. They see pseudoscience, a disregard for methodological rigor, and a dangerous romanticism that can lead to real damage, unauthorized digs, the misreading of data, and the exploitation of public fascination for profit. They rightly defend the painstaking, peer-reviewed process of discovery. Yet occasionally, the tension produces a spark. The idea of an internal construction ramp, once a fringe theory, gained traction through detailed engineering modeling and eventually helped inform the interpretation of the big void. The dreamers, unconstrained by academic convention, sometimes ask the bold, what-if questions that career scientists cannot risk. So two worlds orbit the same monument. One speaks in the careful language of peer-reviewed journals, of anomalies and voids. The other speaks in the thrilling language of chambers and secrets. One is afraid of being wrong. The other is afraid of never knowing. Both are united by a profound awe for the pyramid. Both are, in their own ways, trying to listen. The gatekeepers hold the keys to the physical site, protecting it from literal destruction. The dreamers hold the keys to the imagination, protecting it from becoming a boring, solved puzzle. The hidden chambers exist in the liminal space between these two forces, as physical spaces awaiting confirmation, and as cultural icons already brimming with meaning. The truth, when and if it emerges, will likely belong to neither camp entirely, but in the uncharted territory where hard data meets the timeless human need for wonder. The pyramid, in its eternal patience, listens to both. Imagine standing in the grand gallery, your back against the cool, corbelled stone. Above your head, just a few meters of solid limestone separate you from the vast, echoing nothingness of the big void. You are breathing the same air as the known world, but you are a wall's width away from a separate reality, a pocket of antiquity sealed before the fall of Troy, the rise of Rome, or the birth of Christ. To understand what might be inside, we must dissect the pyramid not as a tomb, but as a living organism designed for a specific sacred purpose. Its hidden chambers are not random closets. They are vital organs in a symbolic body. Let us begin with the north face, the pyramid's most dynamic feature. The original entrance, now hidden behind the massive, displaced girdle stones used by Caliph al-Mamun's men, sits not at ground level but high up. It is precisely aligned. From this entrance, the descending passage plunges down into the earth, aiming like a spear at the pole star of 2500 BC. This passage represents the descent into the underworld, the Juat. But halfway down, the ascending passage branches off, leading upward to the grand gallery and the king's chamber. This is the path of resurrection. The pyramid thus captures the entire journey, down into death, up into eternal life. So where do the hidden spaces fit? The big void, running parallel to the grand gallery, could be seen as a higher parallel path, the final divine ascent after the initial resurrection. It is the spirit breaking free of even the majestic stone confines of the gallery, moving into a purer, hidden realm. Now consider the bedrock. The subterranean chamber, rough and unfinished, is carved deep into the living rock beneath the pyramid. It has a mysterious pit in its floor and a dead-end tunnel leading from it. For years, it was seen as an abandoned project. But what if it is exactly what it was meant to be, the deepest level of the underworld? And what if it is not alone? Ground-penetrating radar has hinted at anomalies, potential cavities in the bedrock around and beneath it. Could there be a lower, even more secret network, a true subterranean world mirroring the celestial one above? The legends of underground chambers on the plateau would align with this. A hidden chamber in the bedrock would be the ultimate root of the pyramid's symbolism, the secret seed from which the stone mountain grows. The Queen's chamber presents another puzzle. Its shafts, once thought symbolic, were found to have small doors with copper fittings. This tells us they were meant to be passed through, but not by anything physical. They are spirit pathways. The thermal anomaly on the eastern side of the pyramid near its base is directly in line with one of these shafts' theoretical trajectories. Could this hotspot mark where a hidden, symbolic target chamber lies, a destination for the spirit traveling from the Queen's chamber? It is a tantalizing thought. A network of small, symbolic chambers dotting the pyramid's bulk, each a way station in a ritual journey we can only dimly perceive. Then there is the sheer engineering logic. The relieving chambers above the king's chamber are a functional masterpiece. But the newly discovered void is different. It is not directly above the chamber's ceiling. It is offset, running along the gallery's spine. If its purpose was purely structural to relieve weight, its placement is strange. This suggests its purpose was also symbolic, or perhaps it served a dual role, a construction feature that was intentionally left as a sealed architectural element because its form had a ritual meaning. Perhaps it was a model of the celestial waterway, the Milky Way, placed above the pharaoh's rebirth chamber as a map for his stellar voyage. The anatomy of the secret, therefore, is likely a hybrid. It is part construction utility, part spiritual map. The builders, masters of both stone and symbol, would not have wasted an effort. A large internal ramp used to build the most sacred inner chambers would, upon completion, become a sealed testament to the act of creation itself, a sacred artery. A small chamber behind the chevrons might hold the foundation deposits, the ceremonial tools used in the opening of the mouth, ritual that would animate the pyramid itself. Each hidden space has a potential dual passport, one stamped by the foreman's practical needs and one stamped by the priest's sacred requirements. To find one would be to understand both the sweat on the builder's brow and the prayer on the pharaoh's lips. The pyramid's body is not just a corpse of stone. It is a frozen moment of transformation, and the hidden chambers are the unseen engines of that change, still humming with intention after all these millennia. We are not just looking for rooms. We are looking for the clockwork of a belief system, perfectly preserved in geometric silence. For 4,500 years, the air inside the sealed voids of the Great Pyramid has been still. It has not felt a breeze, heard a breath, or been touched by the humidity of the Nile. It is air from the age of pyramids, trapped and sleeping. This is perhaps the most overlooked, yet most breathtaking aspect of the hidden chambers. They are not just voids in stone. They are time capsules of atmosphere. The very breath of the builders, the dust from their tools, the lingering molecules from extinguished torches or drying plaster, all of it could be suspended in that stagnant, ancient air, a chemical snapshot of a day in the 26th century BC. The prospect changes everything. The treasure may not be gold, but gas. Scientists call this the microclimate of a sealed archaeological space. The discovery of King Tutankhamun's tomb was transformative not just for the objects, but for the sealed environment they were found in. The smell of ancient perfumes, the particular decay of organic materials, the specific conditions that preserved wood and textile, these were all data. A chamber sealed within the Great Pyramid would be a far more pristine environment. No tomb robbers, no periodic floods, no shifting sands. Just perpetual, dry, dark stability. Analyzing that air could tell us about the climate of ancient Egypt, the composition of the atmosphere before large-scale human industry, even the possible presence of organic materials now long decayed elsewhere. Were there wooden measuring rods, leather bags for water, baskets holding food for the workers' final ritual meal before sealing the chamber? Their organic traces would have vanished into dust, but their chemical fingerprints might still linger in the air or adhered to the chamber walls. This raises profound technical and ethical challenges. The moment a seal is breached, that ancient atmosphere mixes with the modern world. It is gone in a sigh. Any mission to explore a hidden chamber would, therefore, need to be an environmental mission first. Engineers dream of sophisticated airlock systems, of drills equipped with hollow needles that can extract air samples before any visual breach is made, of sterile robotic probes that could enter without disturbing the delicate balance. The goal would be to biopsy the void, to take its temperature, taste its air, and listen to its acoustic properties before ever laying a light upon its walls. What if the air inside is low in oxygen, preserving materials in a state of suspended decay? What if it holds a higher concentration of a specific gas, like argon or radon, telling a story of the stone's radioactive decay over millennia? The chamber itself becomes a scientific instrument, a natural lab that has been running a single 45-century-long experiment in preservation. Then there is the potential for what is on the walls. The known chambers of the pyramid are starkly, famously bare of the inscriptions that cover later pyramids. But what if the hidden chambers are different? What if the act of sealing them away was the point? and their walls were covered in texts too powerful, too sacred to be seen. The pyramid texts found in later pyramids spell out the magic of resurrection. Could the original master copy of these spells be hidden in the big void? Not carved, perhaps, but painted in ochre and charcoal on a prepared plaster wall. Sealed in absolute darkness and stable air, such paintings could be as vibrant as the day they were made, waiting for a light to be shone upon them for the first time since the dynasty of Khufu. The idea is dizzying, a gallery of ancient art, a theological manifesto hidden in plain sight all this time. Alternatively, the walls might hold a different kind of message, the graffiti of the builders. The quarry marks found in the relieving chambers were casual, administrative. But in a sealed construction gallery, the workers might have left more personal marks, a rough sketch, a name, a joke. This would be a human connection of unparalleled intimacy. To see the handprint of a man who placed the final stone, to read his casual notation about the weather or his foreman, would bridge the millennia not between kings and scholars, but between laborers. It would transform the pyramid from a monument of a pharaoh into a monument of a people. This changes the emotional weight of exploration. It is no longer a hunt for a thing, but for a context. The breath of the mountain holds stories. Each molecule is a potential page in a lost book. The pressure to explore becomes a pressure to preserve at a molecular level. The world holds its own breath, wondering what the first puff of air from a hidden chamber will smell like. Will it carry the scent of cedar oil used in ritual, the chalky tang of gypsum plaster, or just the dry, odorless sigh of eternal stone? That first breath, analyzed by a mass spectrometer, could be the most important archaeological discovery of the century, telling us not what the Egyptians built, but who they were in the quiet moments when the monument turned from a construction site into a sacred secret, and the last priest backed out, sealing the silent, waiting dark behind him. The tension between knowing and preserving could not hold forever. The whispers from the muon detectors grew into a consensus, a scientific chorus pointing insistently at the north face. The focus sharpened on the area around the massive limestone chevrons, those unique angled stones above the original entrance. The muon data hinted not at one, but at two anomalies here. A smaller void behind the chevrons themselves, and the larger corridor-like void deeper within, the big void, which seemed to have an end that angled towards this northern region. It was as if the pyramid's secret anatomy was pressing against its skin at this precise point. The decision was made, to find a keyhole, not a door. The goal was minimal surgical intrusion, a peek, not a passage. In the winter of 2022, a delicate operation began. Using endoscopic technology similar to that used in medical procedures, a team prepared to drill a tiny hole just 3 millimeters wide, the width of a drinking straw, through the joining between two of the grand chevron stones. The location was chosen with extreme care, guided by 3D models from laser scans and muon data, aiming for what was believed to be the edge of the smaller void. The world watched, holding its breath. This was not the dramatic breach of a tomb door. It was the careful insertion of a needle, a biopsy of history. The drill, fine and precise, bit into the ancient limestone. It passed through the outer stone, then through the mortar joint, and then into empty space. The drill bit met no resistance for a short distance before touching another surface, a hollow. The team then threaded a flexible fiber optic camera through the narrow channel. The camera's light, the first to pierce this darkness in over 4.5 millennia, flickered on. The images it sent back were grainy, shaky, and utterly extraordinary. The camera revealed a small, corbelled corridor. The walls sloped inward as they rose, exactly like the Grand Gallery, but on a much smaller scale. It was a miniature version of that majestic space. The corridor was horizontal, leading back into the heart of the pyramid, and its ceiling and floor were clean, finished. There were no inscriptions, no artifacts littering the floor, but its existence was the revelation. This was not a rough construction gap. It was a carefully built, architecturally significant feature, perfectly sealed and hidden behind the monumental chevrons. The corridor appeared to be sloping slightly upwards, and at its far end, as the camera's light strained to reach, there seemed to be a larger, open space. The smaller void was a connector, a secret antechamber leading to the greater mystery beyond. This was the first keyhole, and through it we saw not treasure but geometry. The discovery was profound in its simplicity. It confirmed several things at once. First, the hidden spaces were intentional architectural elements built with the same care as the public chambers. Second, the chevrons were not just structural. They were a disguise, a magnificent false front hiding a secret passageway. Third, and most importantly, it proved the muon tomography was stunningly accurate. The shadows on the screen were real. The big void was real. And now there was a tangible, physical pathway that seemed to lead toward it. Emotionally, the impact was seismic but quiet. There was no gold, no mummy, no crystal tablet. Instead, there was a corridor. A perfectly empty, beautifully made corridor. This emptiness was more compelling than any pile of treasure could have been. It screamed of purpose. A corridor is for walking, for moving from one place to another. This one led from behind the chevrons. To where? To the larger void? To another unknown chamber. The fact of its existence shifted the entire debate. The pyramid was now conclusively a building with more rooms than the guidebooks showed. It was like discovering that your house, which you have lived in for years, has a perfectly finished, sealed-off wing behind a bookcase. The keyhole view also raised immediate new questions. Why build a beautiful, corbelled corridor that no one would ever see? Was it a model, a dummy gallery for the king's spirit? A symbolic pathway that completed a ritual circuit? Or was it, as some engineers immediately posited, part of an incredibly sophisticated counterweight system for the chevrons themselves? A functional space that was simply sealed once its job was done. The camera could not see everything. It could not turn corners or measure the air. It showed a tantalizing glimpse of a larger space at the end, but details were lost in shadow and pixelation. That tiny hole, that first keyhole, did not solve the mystery. It deepened it. It transformed the hidden chambers from theoretical anomalies into factual architecture. The mountain had spoken, not with a shout, but with a sigh. A faint breath of ancient, dusty air escaping through a 3-millimeter hole, carrying with it the silent, monumental truth that the Great Pyramid had been keeping secrets, and was only just beginning to tell. The grainy images from the endoscopic camera traveled around the world in an instant, igniting a firestorm of quiet awe. Here was not a legend, not a shadow on a scan, but stone and space. The small, corbelled corridor behind the chevrons was given a name, the North Face Corridor. It became a fact, a new line on the map of the impossible. But facts in the Great Pyramid are only the beginning of deeper mysteries. The corridor's existence answered one question with 100 more, each more intricate than the last. Why corbelled? The corbelled technique, where each layer of stone projects slightly inward over the one below, is a signature of the pyramid's grandest spaces, the grand gallery and the relieving chambers. It is a technique of strength and significance used for important weight-bearing structures. Its use in this hidden tiny corridor means the builders considered this space architecturally important. It was not a crawl space or a leftover gap. It was a deliberate, engineered feature. But for what? If it was merely a construction access, a simple squared tunnel would have sufficed. The corbelling suggests this corridor was meant to be a finished, permanent, perhaps even symbolic part of the pyramid's internal cosmos. The camera's view showed the corridor floor and ceiling were clean. No construction debris, no tool marks left in haste, no dropped pottery or charcoal from workmen's lamps. This cleanliness is deafening. It means the corridor was swept, prepared, and then sealed. It was not abandoned, it was curated. This was a space made ready for eternity. The emptiness is not an accident, it is the feature. The corridor's purpose might have been fulfilled simply by its existence, by being a sealed, perfect, hidden geometric form. In Egyptian sacred architecture, the perfection of the form often was the magic. The hidden corridor could be a kind of architectural spell, a frozen mantra in stone, its power derived from its secrecy and its perfect shape. Then there is the tantalizing glimpse of a larger space at the corridor's end. The camera light, feeble at that distance, could not define it. Was it the beginning of the vast, big void running above the grand gallery? Or was it a separate chamber, a room that acts as a junction between the North Face secret and the internal void? The geometry suggests the North Face corridor is like a hidden fuse leading to a buried powder keg of space. It is the pointer, the arrow on the map saying the important thing is this way. This arrangement, a hidden entrance behind a dramatic architectural feature, the chevrons, leading to a small, perfect corridor which in turn leads to a larger void, mirrors in a secret way the pyramid's known layout. The chevrons are like the original hidden entrance. The North Face corridor is like the ascending passage, tight and precise. And the larger void, could it be a hidden counterpart to the king's chamber? Not a burial chamber, but a chamber of a different kind of transformation. If the known chambers are for the physical and spiritual resurrection of the king, perhaps the hidden chambers are for the monument itself, a kind of sacred engine room where the pyramid's symbolic power was believed to be generated and contained. The discovery also forces a reevaluation of the chevrons. They are now definitively a door, a sealed, monumental door. Their inverted V shape, unique in all of Egyptian architecture, may be more than a weight-distributing device. Some researchers see in their shape the hieroglyph for horizon, the magical place where the sun is reborn every day and the dead pharaoh hope to be reborn. To place the secret entrance behind this symbol is profound. It means the true horizon, the real place of rebirth, is not the pyramid's exterior, but a hidden interior space. The pharaoh's journey did not end in the king's chamber. It passed through a symbolic horizon into a sealed, celestial realm within the very mountain built for him. So the corridor asks us, with every empty, perfectly cut stone, what do you value? We look for treasure, for artifacts, for bodies. The builders valued silence, geometry, and hidden perfection. They invested immense skill in a space meant to be null, a negative, a breath held forever. The North Face corridor is a lesson in a different way of thinking about eternity. It is not about leaving a mark for the future to see. It is about creating a perfect, secret truth that the future might someday sense but never fully possess. The questions it raises are not just archaeological, they are philosophical. They ask us why we build, what we hide, and what parts of our legacy we deem too powerful, too sacred, or too dangerous to be left in the light. The view from the keyhole was intimate, a close-up of ancient dust and precise stonework. But to understand the secret corridor's place in the grand scheme, we must pull back, far back. We must leave the dim confines of the pyramid and ascend to the vantage point of the satellites circling the Earth. From this impossible height, the Great Pyramid is a tiny, weathered square on the vast canvas of the Giza Plateau. Yet even from space, new secrets are being teased from the light and the sand. Remote sensing, the science of seeing without touching, is painting a broader, stranger picture of what might lie beneath, suggesting that the hidden chambers in the pyramid are just one piece of a much larger hidden puzzle. Satellites equipped with advanced multispectral and radar sensors now scan the plateau. They can detect subtle differences in soil density, moisture content, and thermal inertia, the way the ground holds heat. These scans have revealed a landscape of ghosts beneath the sand. Around the pyramids, particularly to the south and east, the data shows tantalizing linear and rectangular anomalies buried at shallow depths. These are not natural rock formations. They have the shape of foundations, walls, and streets. They hint at a vast, buried infrastructure surrounding the monuments. Lost temples, worker settlements, administrative buildings, and processional causeways that have been swallowed by the desert over millennia. This suggests the pyramids were not lonely tombs in a wasteland, but the glittering cores of a thriving, sacred complex, a city of the dead and the living that serviced the eternal machines of stone. More startling are the deeper anomalies. Ground-penetrating radar data, analyzed from satellite and aerial platforms, has hinted at what some researchers call anomalous cavities in the bedrock directly under the Sphinx and in the area between the Sphinx and the pyramids. These are not tombs from the dynastic period. They are deeper, older-seeming features. Could they be natural fissures used and expanded by humans? Or are they deliberately carved subterranean chambers older than the pyramids themselves? The legend of the Hall of Records gains a shiver of potential from these scans. If a hidden archive exists, it makes sense it would be buried in the bedrock, the most stable, enduring part of the site, rather than within the man-made mountain above. This satellite view also clarifies the celestial mirror. The alignment of the three Giza pyramids with Orion's belt is well known, but from space, other patterns emerge. The Nile River, the lifeblood of Egypt, can be seen as a terrestrial mirror of the Milky Way in the sky. The pyramids, sitting on the west bank where the sun sets, the land of the dead, become the stellar landmarks in that earthly galaxy. Where then would a hidden chamber fit in this cosmic map? If the known chambers align with specific stars, a major hidden void might align with a star invisible to the naked eye, or with the dark spaces between the stars, the hidden realms of the duet. The big void, running parallel to the grand gallery but offset, could be mapping the unseen path of the sun during the night, its journey through the underworld before dawn. The most profound implication of the space-based view is one of context. It reveals the pyramid not as an isolated wonder, but as the central node in a vast, engineered landscape. The hidden chambers within it are then not random additions, but likely integral components of this grand design. A sealed corridor behind the north face might align with a buried causeway heading towards the Nile. A void deep within might sit directly above a geological fault or a specially chosen point in the bedrock considered spiritually potent. The builders did not just sculpt a mountain, they tuned an entire territory. The chambers we cannot see might be the tuning forks for this sacred instrument, placed at precise points to resonate with the land and the sky. Seeing from space also underscores the fragility of the secret. The thermal scans show the pyramid breathing, heating and cooling with the sun. The pressure of millions of tourists, the vibration from nearby Cairo, the slow, insidious effects of wind and pollution, all these are monitored from orbit. The hidden chambers, preserved for so long in perfect stasis, now exist in a world that presses in on them from all sides. The satellite watchers are not just looking for secrets. They are also standing guard, measuring the slow sigh of the monument as it endures a modern world it was never designed for. The void within may be safe from robbers, but is it safe from the tremors of our civilization? The view from space is humbling. It shows a tiny, fragile artifact of human genius clinging to a planet, its deepest secrets still whispering from the dark, waiting to be understood before the sands of time, both literal and metaphorical, shift once more. To understand the silence inside the hidden corridors, we must listen to the noisy, vibrant world that created them. The Great Pyramid did not rise in a vacuum. It was the ultimate expression of a cultural explosion, the pinnacle of the Fourth Dynasty's absolute power and profound theological ambition. This was the age of kings who saw themselves not just as rulers, but as living gods, the sole nexus between humanity and the cosmos. The pyramid was their stairway to heaven, but perhaps also their vault, their sanctuary, and their final, unbreachable argument carved in stone. The hidden chambers may hold the key to the very psyche of this dynasty, a dynasty that reached for eternity and then mysteriously began to crumble. Khufu, the king for whom the Great Pyramid was built, remains a ghost. We have his monument, but almost nothing of the man. A tiny ivory statuette is his only certain portrait. Greek historians, writing millennia later, painted him as a cruel tyrant, forcing his people into slavery. Egyptian records are silent on his character, shouting only of his achievement. The pyramid itself is his biography. Its scale speaks of a control over resources and human labor that is staggering, a control bordering on the divine. The hidden spaces, then, might reflect a hidden aspect of his reign or his persona. Could they contain a more personal testament, something too potent for public display? Not treasure, but perhaps a record of a secret struggle, a prophecy, or a divine revelation that justified his monumental effort. In a society where the king's word was divine law, a sealed chamber could be a divine thought made permanent. Then comes the figure of Hemianu, Khufu's vizier and master architect. He is the true genius behind the mountain, the man who translated a king's godly ambition into workable engineering. For the first time in history, we can almost sense an individual mind at work in the stones. The precision, the backups like the relieving chambers, the clever use of internal ramps and counterweights, these speak of a practical, brilliant, and deeply cautious thinker. A man who planned for settling, for earthquakes, for millennia. What would such a man do with the ultimate secrets of his design? Would he not hide them? The hidden corridors, particularly the north face corridor with its perfect corbelling, feel like the signature of a master who left his final, most elegant solution in a place only the gods, or the far future, would see. Perhaps the big void is Hemianu's final report, a sealed model of his methods, a professional legacy for a future generation of builders he knew would not come for thousands of years. The dynasty's trajectory after Khufu is telling. His son Jedefer broke with tradition, building his pyramid away at Abu Rawash. His successor, Khafre, returned to Giza to build the second pyramid and the enigmatic Sphinx. Menkora, who followed, built the third, smaller pyramid. The scale diminishes. The certainty seems to waver. Was there a crisis of faith, an economic breaking point? Or did something happen, a theological schism, a failed ritual? That made the successors rethink the colossal, hidden complexity of Khufu's monument. The existence of vast, sealed spaces in the Great Pyramid that were never replicated might hold a clue. Did something go into those chambers that was meant to stay there? A power or a pact that subsequent kings chose not to meddle with? The hidden chambers could be the root of a dynasty's secret, a first, perfect experiment in God-making that proved too dangerous, too costly, or too perfect to ever attempt again. The pyramid's stark, empty known chambers also speak volumes. Later pyramids would be filled with the pyramid texts, magical spells covering the walls to guide the king. Khufu's pyramid is silent. This silence is now deafening in light of the hidden voids. Perhaps the magic, the texts, the guidance were not meant for the walls of the burial chamber. Perhaps they were placed in the hidden chambers where the real transformation was meant to occur. The king's body in the sarcophagus was just the anchor. His spirit's journey happened in the sealed, sacred geometry of the voids above and around him. The dynasty's later turn toward inscribing texts on chamber walls could then be seen as a diminishment, a move to make the magic public and accessible, because the true, hidden machinery of resurrection was lost or considered too potent to replicate. Thus, the echo from the hidden chambers is not just an architectural one. It is the echo of a specific family's moment of absolute dizzying peak. It is the sound of a civilization pushing itself to its physical and spiritual limit to create a machine for immortality. The void holds the breath of that ambition, to discover what is truly there, even if it is only more perfect, empty architecture, would be to finally hear the unspoken words of Khufu and the unspoken calculations of Hemianu. It would tell us what they believed was worth hiding forever, and in doing so reveal what they valued above all else. Not gold nor glory alone, but a perfect, secret key to the universe, locked away in the heart of a mountain they built to touch the stars. The dynasty fell, their names faded, but that key, if it exists, still waits in the dark. A single, unanswered question hanging in the still air of a corridor no one was ever meant to walk. The story of the Great Pyramid's hidden chambers is not a straight line from past to present. It is a bridge, a fragile, flickering connection between two worlds that barely understand each other. On one side stands the ancient mind, thinking in symbols, operating on a timescale of eternity, building with a faith in stone we can scarcely fathom. On the other side stands the modern mind, armed with logic, driven by data, and obsessed with the what and the how. The sealed void is the space between them, a silent span over which a conversation must somehow occur. This is the most delicate part of the quest, not the discovery, but the translation. How do we, the children of science and skepticism, interpret the work of the children of myth and monument? Consider the ancient mind that conceived the pyramid. For them, the material and spiritual worlds were not separate. A stone was not just a stone. It could be a representation of a primordial mound, a star could be a god, a geometric shape could hold generative power. Building the pyramid was not just construction, it was a cosmic act, a ritual that stabilized Ma'at, the divine order of the universe. In this worldview, a hidden chamber is not a storage closet. It is a sacred cell, a battery for spiritual energy, a gestation room for a divine rebirth. Its emptiness might be its most critical feature. Emptiness to them was potential. It was the dark, fertile void before creation, the silence before the first word of a spell. The perfect, corbelled, inaccessible north face corridor might be, in essence, a three-dimensional hieroglyph for the hidden path of the sun, its very existence ensuring the sun's rebirth each dawn. Now the modern mind approaches this with muon detectors. It sees anomalies and voids. It asks functional questions. Was it a construction ramp, a relieving chamber, a mistake? We seek a practical purpose because our world is built on utility. The idea of building something magnificent only to hide it forever seems like insanity, a waste. This is the core of the misunderstanding. The builders did not see it as waste. They saw it as the ultimate offering, the most precious part of the structure given wholly to the gods, forever beyond human use. The hidden chamber is the part of the machine that is meant to run without observation, the sealed engine that powers the monument's eternal purpose. The bridge between these minds is empathy built on rigorous respect. It requires the scientist to accept that the why might be symbolic, and the historian to accept that the how is grounded in brilliant, practical engineering. The hidden corridor is both a functional construction feature and a sacred pathway. The big void is both a sealed-off ramp and the celestial counterpart to the grand gallery. The truth is not one or the other. It is an alloy of both. The ancient builders did not separate the engineer from the priest. Hemianu was likely both. His calculations of stress and load were in service of a theological vision. The perfect angle of a shaft was both an astronomical alignment and a spiritual conduit. This bridging changes what we hope to find. We must not hope for a room that looks like a museum exhibit with labeled artifacts. We must prepare for a space that feels like a chapel or a sealed machine room. The walls might be blank because the power is in the shape. The floor might be bare because the ritual was in the ceiling. The treasure might be the confirmation of a theory, the precise measurement of the space, the analysis of its air, and the humbling realization of its intent. To cross this bridge, modern exploration must adopt a new language, one of extreme subtlety. The next steps cannot be invasive. They must be interrogative. Technologies that can feel the surface of the hidden chambers walls through solid stone using resonant frequencies or quantum sensing. Methods to analyze the atomic composition of the air molecules that might seep through microscopic pores over decades. The goal is to listen to the chamber's story without asking it to speak aloud. We are trying to read a closed book by the weight of its cover, the smell of its pages, and the slight give of its binding. The Great Pyramid, in its patient arrogance, has always been waiting for us to grow up enough to ask the right questions. It waited through the era of treasure hunters. It is waiting now through the era of scanners. It will wait until we approach its hidden heart not as conquerors or consumers, but as students finally ready to learn a lesson in a language beyond words, the language of sacred space, silent purpose, and time measured not in years, but in the turning of stars. The bridge is there in the darkness of the void. Crossing it will require us to leave some of our modern certainty behind, and to walk with a torch of humility into the ancient dark. The single keyhole was a revelation, but it was not enough. Science thrives on confirmation, on multiple lines of sight converging on a single truth. The discovery of the North Face corridor demanded a broader, more detailed cartography of the invisible. The whisper from the stones had to become a map. In the years that followed the endoscopic peak, the Scan Pyramids team and other researchers around the world refined their tools and their questions. They began a process not of invasion, but of deep listening, using an orchestra of non-invasive techniques to trace the hidden anatomy of the pyramid with increasing clarity. New muon detector arrays were installed, larger and more sensitive. They were placed at multiple strategic points, in the descending corridor, in the Queen's chamber, and even in areas outside the pyramid's base. By capturing muons from different angles, scientists could begin to perform a kind of triangulation on the voids. This was no longer just detecting a shadow. It was sculpting it in 3 dimensions. The data began to flesh out the big void. Its dimensions solidified. It was approximately 30 meters long, with a cross-section similar to the Grand Gallery, confirming it was a major structural feature. It appeared to have a slight upward slope, mirroring the gallery below, and its position was now pinpointed with an accuracy of a few feet. It was real, it was large, and it was waiting. Alongside the muons, another quiet technology was employed: ultrasonic testing. By sending high-frequency sound waves into the stone and measuring their echo, researchers could detect differences in density and the presence of cracks or cavities at a much finer resolution than muons could provide, though at a shallower depth. This technique was used to meticulously scan the walls of known chambers, particularly around the areas where hidden spaces were suspected. The echoes from the stones around the Queen's chamber and the walls of the Grand Gallery began to sketch the boundaries of the unknown with finer lines. They hinted at the possible thickness of the wall separating the Grand Gallery from the big void, and suggested other, smaller discontinuities in the masonry, perhaps plugged niches or the ends of construction tunnels. Most importantly, the different data sets were fused. The broad, deep shadow from the muons was combined with the sharp, shallow echoes from the ultrasonics and the precise surface model from the 3D laser scans. Supercomputers wove these threads together into a single, stunning simulation. For the first time in human history, A person could put on a virtual reality headset and stand inside the big void. They could look up at its corbelled ceiling, if it had one, run a hand along its hypothetical walls, and see exactly how it related to the grand gallery a few meters below their virtual feet. They could fly through solid stone to follow the north face corridor back to its connection point. This digital twin became the most important tool of all. It allowed Egyptologists, engineers, and archaeologists to collaborate in a space that no living person had ever seen. The map that emerged was complex and suggestive. It showed the big void not as an isolated bubble, but as the likely central chamber of a hidden network. The north face corridor appeared to be one possible access point, but the simulations also suggested another potential connection, from the top of the grand gallery itself. The original rough grotto in the wall of the grand gallery, long considered a mysterious unfinished niche, was now re-examined. Its location and shape in the context of the new map made it a prime candidate for a sealed doorway leading into the void above. The pyramid's secret spaces seemed to be connected to the known pathway at its most dramatic point, the very top of the soaring gallery, where the king's spirit would have reached its peak ascent before entering the king's chamber. This mapping exercise did something crucial. It moved the discussion from if to where and how. The hidden architecture was now an accepted part of the pyramid's plan. The debate shifted to methodology. How could one ethically verify the map? The idea of a minimally invasive technique was taken to its extreme. Proposals were drafted for a new generation of exploration. A robot so slender it could traverse the original builder's shafts, equipped with a micro drill and a fiber optic thread no thicker than a human hair. A sensor that could be inserted into the 3mm keyhole to sniff the air chemistry beyond. A radar device small enough to fit through the same hole and send radio waves down the hidden corridor to map its full length and what lay at its end. The whisper had become a map, and the map became a mandate. It revealed a structure far more intricate and intelligent than anyone had dreamed just a decade before. The Great Pyramid was no longer a simple tripartite tomb. It was a layered construct with a public face of passages and chambers for the mortal funeral, and a hidden, sealed inner sanctum for the divine transformation that was meant to follow. The map was the first translation of the builder's silent intent. It showed a mountain that was not solid but honeycombed with purpose. Every line on this digital chart was a question written in the language of space. What are you? Why are you here? And what silent function have you been performing alone in the dark since the world was young? The map is drawn. The voids are charted. The keyhole is drilled. The world knows with a certainty that hums through scientific journals and thrills through public imagination that the Great Pyramid holds a secret suite of rooms. Yet there we stand on the threshold, frozen. This is the silence before the storm, a pregnant pause filled not with inactivity, but with the immense weight of a decision. To go further is to cross a line from observation to interaction, a line that has held for 45 centuries. The ethical, technical, and philosophical debates that once simmered in academic halls now roar like a desert wind through the very corridors of the pyramid. On one side of the debate are the proponents of knowing. They argue that our technology has given us a moral imperative. We have a duty to knowledge itself, to the human story, to uncover what the pyramid contains. The builders, they suggest, created these spaces with a purpose. That purpose, whatever it was, is a piece of human history. By leaving it sealed, we are allowing that piece to be lost forever to decay, to potential seismic shifts, or to the slow, corrosive chemistry of time. They propose that with our modern techniques, micro-robotics, nano-sampling, sterile environments, we can enter these spaces as ghosts, leaving no trace, taking only data. To not look, they claim, is a form of intellectual cowardice, a failure of our generation's unique responsibility to the past. Arrayed against them are the guardians of being. They see the sealed chambers as the pyramid's final, inviolable sanctuary. The act of sealing was the last ritual, the final word in a ceremony we do not understand. To break that seal, even with a hair-thin fiber optic thread, is to vandalize that ritual, to interrupt a process that was meant to be eternal. They argue that the pyramid's greatest gift to us is its mystery, its ability to make us wonder. Once revealed, a secret loses its power to inspire. What if we look and find nothing but more empty, perfect stone? The anticlimax could be culturally devastating. Worse, what if we find something we are not equipped to understand or preserve? The first gust of modern air could reduce a fragile papyrus to dust or distort the pristine microclimate forever. Their motto is caution. The pyramid has waited this long. It can wait for a future with even better, less invasive technology. Between these poles, the Egyptian authorities navigate a narrow path. For them, the pyramid is not just an archaeological site. It is a living symbol, a source of national pride, and an economic cornerstone. Any decision must balance global scientific interest with national sovereignty, public fascination with scholarly integrity, and the hunger for discovery with the sacred duty of preservation. The pressure is immense. From television networks offering millions for exclusive access to explorers with wild theories and private funding, the pyramid is besieged by the modern world's desire for a spectacle. In this charged silence, new scanning continues. Each pass with a more refined muon detector, each new thermal image, is an attempt to learn just enough more to make the decision clearer. Perhaps the next scan will show the hidden corridor is clearly filled with rubble, settling the question. Perhaps it will reveal the unmistakable metallic signature of artifacts, forcing the hand. The waiting is a form of research in itself. Scientists monitor the keyhole for any seepage of gases, study the thermal stability of the stone around the void, and model the structural impact of any potential entry. They are diagnosing the patient before considering surgery. This pause is a mirror to the ancient pause that must have occurred when the chambers were first sealed. Imagine the last priest, the last worker backing out of the north face corridor, watching the light shrink to a sliver as the massive chevron stone was slid into place from the outside. The finality of that moment, the commitment to eternal darkness, must have been profound. Our modern silence echoes that ancient one. We are weighing the same question, but in reverse, to bring back the light. The storm, when it comes, will not be one of dust and falling stone, but of data, debate, and irrevocable choice. The pyramid's hidden heart beats slowly in the dark, and with every new non-invasive scan, we feel its rhythm more clearly, counting down to the moment when the waiting ends, and the next word in the story is written not by the ancients but by us. If we could step outside of time to view the Great Pyramid not as a ruin of the past, but as a functioning device, what would we see? This shift in perspective is critical. The pyramid is often called a tomb, but a tomb is a passive thing, a container. The evidence, especially of the hidden chambers, suggests something more dynamic. It suggests a machine. Not a machine of gears and levers, but of geometry, alignment, and intent. A clockwork built to operate on the scale of eternity, its purpose woven into the very fabric of its design. The hidden chambers may be the mainspring of this device, the sealed power source that was meant to run forever unseen. Consider the known chambers as parts of this mechanism. The subterranean chamber, deep in the bedrock, is the grounding point, the connection to the underworld, the Earth terminal. The Queen's chamber, with its niche and its mysterious shafts, might be a kind of resonance chamber or a filter. The Grand Gallery, with its soaring, precise corbelling, acts as an amplifier or a wave guide, channeling energy upward. The King's chamber, with its massive granite sarcophagus and unique acoustic properties, is the transformation chamber, the crucible. And above it all, the 5 relieving chambers are not just architectural safeguards. They are tuning plates, carefully spaced and sized to distribute a specific vibrational frequency throughout the structure. Where do the hidden chambers fit in this model? The big void, running parallel to the Grand Gallery, could be a harmonic counterpart. In an energy system, you often have a primary conductor and a secondary one, separated by an insulator. Here, the solid stone between the gallery and the void. This void could be a resonant cavity, designed to vibrate in sympathy with the Grand Gallery, creating a standing wave of energy within the pyramid's core. The ancient concept of Heka, or magical power, was often conceived of as a vibrational force, a creative speech. Could the pyramid have been designed to generate and focus a specific Heka frequency, using its chambers like a stone tuning fork? The north face corridor, discovered behind the chevrons, provides a potential access panel to this machine. In any complex device, there are service ways for the builders to adjust and finalize the mechanism before it is sealed for operation. This small, perfect corridor could have been the final access route to calibrate the hidden void, to perform a last ritual that switched on the machine before it was sealed shut forever. The chevrons themselves, with their unique shape, might then be seen not just as a door, but as a lens or a focusing element for energies, celestial or telluric, channeling them into the hidden network. This idea of the pyramid as a machine for transformation aligns perfectly with its stated purpose: to facilitate the pharaoh's ascension to a stellar afterlife. The machine's fuel was the preserved body and the recited spells. Its output was a transformed divine being. The hidden chambers make sense if they were considered the sacred, off-limits components of this process. The high voltage parts too dangerous for mortal contact. The core of the reactor, where the actual transubstantiation of matter into spirit was believed to occur. Later pyramids, with their walls covered in spells, could be seen as attempts to replicate this machinery through text, because the original, physical, hidden technology was too complex or too secret to reproduce. This perspective changes the emotional resonance of exploration. We are not just looking for a room. We are trying to understand if the machine is still on. Is there a residual energy, a magnetic anomaly, a peculiar acoustic signature within the big void that suggests a function beyond mere space. Non-invasive sensors are now being used to listen for this clockwork's faint, eternal tick. Magnetometers measure subtle fields. The sensitive seismometers listen for echoes that reveal not just shape, but the elasticity of the stone, hinting at internal stresses that might be part of the design. The quest is to detect the pyramid's purpose not through what it holds, but through what it does, even in silence. The clockwork of eternity is a profound concept. It means the builders did not see death as an end, but as a transfer of state, and they constructed a monumental apparatus to manage that transfer. The hidden chambers are the sealed engine room. To discover them is not to find treasure, but to find the engine itself, cold, silent, and infinitely complex. It asks us to expand our definition of technology. True sophistication may not lie in what is visible and usable, but in what is hidden and sacred, built to perform a single, perfect function once, and then to rest, its purpose fulfilled, its mystery intact, its slow tick counting out not seconds, but ages. As the physical maps of the hidden voids grow sharper, another exploration is happening in parallel, one that does not require muons or endoscopes, but the deep, collective memory of humanity. The Great Pyramid has lived in the human imagination for longer than most nations have existed. It has spawned legends, fueled religions, and inspired countless stories. These stories, these phantom chambers of the mind, are real in their own way. They shape our expectations, color our interpretations, and often hold fragments of truth passed down through the distorting lens of time. Before we can truly understand what is in the dark, we must confront what we have dreamed is there. For centuries, the pyramid was believed to be Joseph's granary, a biblical storehouse for the 7 years of plenty. This idea, though factually wrong, speaks to the monument's overwhelming presence. It had to be part of the world's greatest stories. Medieval Arab tales spoke of automatons guarding hidden halls, of statues that spoke prophecies, and of vast treasures protected by ancient magic. These were not just fantasies. They were attempts to explain the inexplicable scale and precision of the building. The legends of hidden chambers, therefore, are as old as the pyramid's exposure to outsiders. The modern discovery of voids feels like the validation of a very old whisper. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, the pyramid became a playground for mystical numerology. Pyramidologists claimed its measurements encoded the entire timeline of human history, past and future, including the dates of world wars and the second coming of Christ. While this has been thoroughly debunked, it reflects a deep-seated human belief that such a perfect, enduring structure must be a message. The idea that its true meaning is hidden in secret chambers is a direct outgrowth of this. If the visible measurements tell a story, the invisible ones must tell the real story, the master narrative. Then came the age of Atlantis. Through the writings of figures like Ignatius Donnelly and Edgar Cayce, the pyramid became a relic not of ancient Egypt, but of a lost, hyper-advanced civilization. The Hall of Records, a vast archive of crystal and wisdom buried beneath the Sphinx or the pyramids, captured the public imagination. This legend is powerful because it addresses a nagging doubt. Could a society of copper, tools, and rope really have built this? The hidden chambers in this narrative are not for a pharaoh's spirit, but for our own lost heritage. They are a backup drive of human knowledge, waiting for the right time to reboot civilization. Every new scan that shows an anomaly is, to a believer, a step closer to that hall. These phantoms are not harmless. They create immense pressure for a spectacular discovery. They can lead to the dismissal of more mundane but truthful explanations, like construction features. They can also inspire reckless, unauthorized attempts to find proof, damaging the monument. Yet, to completely dismiss these dreams is to ignore a fundamental human truth. We mythologize what we do not understand. The pyramid's sheer otherness demands a story. The hidden chambers, because they are unseen, become the blank page on which every era writes its hopes and fears. The scientific process is now in a race not just against time, but against these phantoms. It must provide a story based on evidence that is compelling enough to satisfy the human need for wonder, without resorting to magic. The great challenge is that the truth may be quieter than the legend. A sealed construction ramp is a miraculous archaeological find, but it is not the hall of records. An empty, symbolic corridor is a profound window into ancient belief, but it holds no glittering artifacts. Ultimately, the phantom chambers and the real voids are in conversation. The dreams pushed us to look. The science is showing us where to look. What we find will likely live in the space between, more astonishing than the skeptics imagined, but more ordinary than the dreamers hoped. It will be a human creation, after all. The final revelation may be that the greatest secret of the Great Pyramid is its ability to hold, for millennia, the full spectrum of human thought, from the practical genius of its engineers to the sacred visions of its priests, to the boundless, dreaming wonder of every generation that has ever stood in its shadow and looked up, sensing that the mountain was not solid, but alive with possibility. The real hidden chamber is the one inside us, where awe and curiosity never die. Stone endures, air shifts, time passes, but what of the ritual? The silent ceremony that turned a construction site into a sacred vessel, that charged the empty chambers with purpose. This is the most fragile ghost of all, the one that leaves no physical trace unless it is caught in the very act of completion and then frozen. As we hover on the brink of the hidden spaces, we must consider not just what they are, but what happened there in the final, sealed moments. The pyramid's greatest secret may not be an object, but an action, an unwritten ritual performed once and then entombed forever. Imagine the scene. The final, colossal capstone, sheathed in gleaming electrum, is set. The interior, a labyrinth of polished granite and precise passages, is complete. The king's body lies within the sarcophagus. The priests have performed the public rites, the opening of the mouth ceremony to animate the statue, the speeches, the offerings. The crowds disperse. But for a chosen few, the high priest, the architect Hemianu, perhaps the royal heir, the most critical work remains. They are not leaving the pyramid, they are activating it. This small group would move not toward the exit, but deeper into the maze, to the hidden ways. They might ascend the grand gallery one final time, but instead of entering the king's chamber, they would stop at the rough, mysterious niche in its wall, the one that the new maps suggest could be a door to the big void. Here, a final, secret ceremony would be conducted. Words spoken there would not be for human ears, but for the stones themselves, to instruct the hidden chambers in their eternal function. Offerings might be placed, not gold, but substances of power. Sacred oils, meteoritic iron, packets of rare herbs, seeded into the hidden void to act as a spiritual catalyst. Then the doorway would be sealed from the inside as they backed out, the act of sealing being the final prayer. Alternatively, the ritual might have centered on the north face corridor. The group could have entered from outside before the mighty chevron stones were slid into their final, perfect positions. Inside that small, corbelled space in flickering lamplight, they would perform the rites that linked the pyramid's heart to the northern stars, the imperishable ones. They might anoint the walls, trace symbols in temporary paint, or simply stand in silent meditation, imprinting the space with intention. Then they would exit, and the massive blocks would be put in place, the sacred geometry locked, the ritual space rendered perfect and inaccessible. The corridor's stunning cleanliness, as seen by the endoscope, supports this. It was prepared as a shrine, then closed. This concept of the unwritten ritual changes what we might detect. Scientific instruments cannot hear ancient words, but they might detect their echoes. If offerings of organic materials were left, their minuscule chemical signature might still linger in the trapped air, detectable by a sensitive enough sniffer. The act of anointing walls with oils could leave a molecular film on the stone, invisible to the eye, but perhaps discernible through spectroscopic analysis if we could ever scan the chamber's interior surface. Even the psychic weight of intense, focused human ceremony, what some might call a psycho-acoustic imprint, is a fringe idea, but it speaks to the profound difference between a room that is simply empty and a room that was sanctified and then sealed. The purpose of such a hidden ritual would be transcendently practical to the ancient mind. They were not just burying a king, they were launching a god. The known chambers were the launch pad. The hidden chambers were the guidance system, programmed through ritual to ensure the king's spirit successfully navigated the celestial waters to join Osiris. By sealing the ritual space, they were protecting the program from corruption, from meddling, from the decay of memory. It was software uploaded to a stone server, and then the terminal was smashed. This is why the ethical dilemma is so acute. To intrude into that space is not like opening a tomb. It is like walking into the middle of a prayer uttered 45 centuries ago, a prayer that was never meant to have an amen. The stillness we sense is not mere absence. It is a held breath, a suspended moment of powerful intention. The explorers of the future, if they enter, must do so with the reverence of archaeologists, the precision of surgeons, and the humility of uninvited guests stumbling upon a sacred act they will never fully comprehend. They will be seeking not treasure, but the ghost of a ceremony, the faint, cold scent of sacred oil, the last vibration of a chant, the shadow of a gesture against a wall that has known only darkness since the ritual's end. To find evidence of the unwritten ritual would be to hear, at last, the pyramid's true voice, not speaking in words, but in the profound silence of a purpose fulfilled. The separate streams of inquiry, the scientific scans, the historical analysis, the engineering theories, and the cultural legends, are no longer parallel lines. They are converging like the carefully angled walls of the pyramid itself, aiming at a single point in the darkness. This convergence is not an accident. It is the inevitable result of looking at the same mystery from every possible angle for long enough. The map is now so detailed, the questions so precise, that the next step is no longer about finding a void, but about defining its nature. The what is known. The why is the target. And to hit that target, a new generation of tools is being born at the intersection of archaeology and astrophysics, of robotics and chemistry. These tools are designed for dialogue, not invasion. One promising technology is an advanced form of neutron imaging. Cosmic ray neutron particles like muons penetrate matter deeply, but they interact differently with atomic nuclei. By measuring how these neutrons scatter, scientists could potentially determine not just the density of the stone, but its elemental composition. Could a hidden chamber contain a higher concentration of, say, quartz or metals? This might suggest the presence of artifacts or ritual offerings without ever breaking the seal. Another frontier is quantum gravity gradiometry. This mind-bending technology aims to measure infinitesimally small variations in gravity. A perfectly empty void, and a void filled with decomposed organic material, would have a minutely different gravitational pull. Mapping this could tell us if the chamber is truly empty or holds matter of a different density than stone. Meanwhile, the robotics teams are thinking smaller, more agile. The next Jetty robot will not just crawl, it will be a swarm. Imagine dozens of insect-sized robots released through a needle-wide borehole. They would be equipped with micro-lidar to map in 3D, microspectrometers to analyze wall composition, and microsamplers to capture dust particles without stirring the air. They would communicate like a hive, building a collective model of the space from thousands of tiny, non-invasive observations. They are designed to be archaeologists of the microscopic, reading the story written in dust layers and molecular residues. This convergence is also happening in the realm of data. Artificial intelligence is now being trained on the entire corpus of Egyptian archaeology. Tomb layouts, ritual texts, architectural plans, material science data. This AI is not making wild guesses. It is looking for patterns. Given the known parameters of the Great Pyramid and the precise dimensions of the Big Void, what does the pattern suggest its function might be? Does its shape and location correlate more strongly with known construction techniques, or with the symbolic proportions of later religious spaces? The AI acts as a hyper-learned consultant, offering probabilities based on everything we know, helping to narrow the infinite possibilities of why. Perhaps the most profound convergence is temporal. We are approaching a point where our technology may finally be subtle enough to match the subtlety of the builder's intent. They worked with the precision of the stars and the patience of geology. For centuries, our methods were crude by comparison, hammers, dynamite, and conjecture. Now we have particle physics and quantum sensors. We are beginning to operate on their level, not of brute force, but of fine measurement and deep pattern recognition. It is as if we have been shouting questions at the pyramid for generations, and only now have we learned to whisper in a language it might deign to answer. This moment of convergence is fragile and fraught. It carries the risk of disappointment. The tools may reveal only more elegant emptiness. It also carries the burden of revelation. They may show us something that shatters comfortable historical narratives. But for the first time, the conversation with the pyramid is becoming a true dialogue. We are no longer just staring at its impassive face. We are learning to read its pulse, to sample its breath, to trace the contours of its hidden thoughts. The streams of knowledge have become a river, flowing with increasing speed towards a single dark doorway. On the other side is not just a room, but an understanding, a chance to complete a sentence left hanging in mid-air when the last block slid into place and the long, silent vigil of the hidden chambers began. In the frantic hum of modern discovery with its whirring drones and supercomputers, it is easy to forget the central, overwhelming truth. The pyramid does not care. It is a patient mountain. It has watched dynasties rise and fall into dust. It has felt the desert shift from grassland to sand at its feet. It has endured earthquakes, wars, the theft of its skin, and the constant brush of curious hands. Our century-long saga of scanning and speculation is, to the pyramid, the blink of an eye, a momentary itch. This perspective is the most important one to hold as we stand on the verge of potentially monumental discovery. The hidden chambers have waited in perfect stillness for over 4,000 years. They can wait a little longer for us to get it right. This patience is woven into the stone itself. Each block was chosen, cut, and placed with a vision of eternity. The builders did not work for quarterly reports or 10-year plans. They worked for a timescale that included the precession of the stars, the slow wearing down of continents. The hidden chambers were the ultimate expression of this long now. They were built to function, symbolically or otherwise, across millennia without maintenance, without witness. Their integrity was guaranteed not by a caretaker, but by geometry and mass. In our rush to know, we must respect this foundational patience. Every decision must be measured against the mountain's own clock. The patient mountain also teaches us about the nature of secrets. A secret kept for a year is gossip. A secret kept for a century is history. A secret kept for 45 centuries becomes part of the fabric of reality. The void within the pyramid is no longer just a withheld fact. It is an elemental feature of the monument, as intrinsic as its height or its angle. To reveal it is not simply to uncover information. It is to alter the monument's very identity, to change something that has been a certain way since the dawn of recorded history. This is a profound responsibility. The pyramid has guarded this secret through the entirety of human civilization's written story. We must ask ourselves if we are worthy of being the generation that ends that vigil. Furthermore, the mountain's patience highlights the transience of our own theories. The internal ramp hypothesis, the spiritual conduit model, the Hall of Records legend. These are all stories we tell to make sense of the silence. The pyramid contains none of these stories. It contains only itself. Our most cherished interpretation may be shattered by a single image from a micro-robot's camera. Or more likely, the truth may be something we have not yet imagined, something outside the stories we have built to comfort ourselves in the face of such silent grandeur. The mountain's patience mocks our haste to explain. It invites us instead to observe, to learn, and to accept that some truths are so large they take centuries, even millennia, to fully comprehend. This does not mean we stop. Exploration is in our nature, as much as patience was in the nature of the builders. But it means we proceed with a different temperament. Not with the zeal of treasure hunters, nor with the cold detachment of data miners, but with the solemnity of students attending a lecture that has been paused for 4,000 years. We are not conquering the secret. We are being permitted by time and technology to listen to the next sentence. The mountain has all the time in the world. We do not. Our challenge is to bridge that gap, to act with the urgency of mortal curiosity, but with the reverence of the eternal stone. The hidden chambers are not going anywhere. They will be there next year, next century, long after our names and our debates are forgotten. This realization is the final, calming breath before the leap. It reminds us that we are not the owners of this mystery, but its temporary stewards, granted a fleeting moment in its long, long life to ask a question, and if we are very careful and very quiet, to finally hear the answer. All paths, both ancient and modern, now lead to a single point. Not the known entrance, nor the niche in the grand gallery, but the end of the slender, secret corridor discovered behind the chevrons. The endoscopic camera saw it, a larger space at the corridor's end, a darkness that swallowed the tiny light. This is the last door. It may not be a door of stone, but a threshold of understanding. Beyond it lies the central chamber of the mystery, the big void, the silent heart of the patient mountain. The world's focus narrows to a point finer than a laser, trained on how to cross this threshold without breaking the spell. The plans are drawn with an almost religious attention to minimal impact. An international consortium of engineers, archaeologists, and ethicists has approved a next-step mission. It will not involve widening the 3-millimeter keyhole. Instead, it will use that tiny channel as a portal for a new kind of sense. The primary tool is a breakthrough in photogrammetry and gas chromatography. A device no thicker than a piece of thread will be threaded through the borehole. On its tip are sensors so small they operate at the nanoscale. This thread is not a camera. It is a tongue and a fingertip. First, it will taste the air. As it inches into the north face corridor and toward the larger void, it will siphon infinitesimal puffs of the ancient atmosphere into a sealed chamber within itself, analyzing the gases in real time. It will search for the chemical ghosts of cedar oil, of burned incense, of decaying linen or papyrus. It will measure radon levels to understand the rock's age and helium to gauge seal integrity. This breath analysis will tell a story of what, if anything, has lived or been placed in that darkness beyond mere stone. Simultaneously, the thread will feel. It will be equipped with a form of atomic force sensing. As it advances, it will extend a probe so tiny it can map the surface of the hidden corridor's walls at a molecular level, detecting differences in texture, minute residues, or the faintest trace of applied pigment, all through the vibration of a single atom at its tip. It will feel for the smoothness of a worked stone versus the roughness of a natural fissure, for the slight tackiness of a resin that might have been applied millennia ago. Only if these indirect senses reveal something compelling, a chemical signature of organics, a geometric pattern on a wall suggesting an inscription, will the next, more visual phase be considered. And even then, the visual will be unlike anything before. Researchers are developing a technique based on muon scattering tomography. By placing detectors inside the known chambers and the small corridor, they might be able to use the natural muon flux to create a detailed image of the void's interior surfaces, essentially taking an X-ray of the empty space to see the shape and texture of its walls. It would be like seeing a room by photographing the shadows cast by a light source inside it. This meticulous, slow approach is a form of respect. It is the acknowledgement that the last door is not just a physical barrier, but a temporal one. To rush, it would be to trample the delicate border between past and present. The goal is to let the chamber reveal itself on its own terms, in the language of chemistry and physics first, before any human eye imposes its own expectations upon it. The entire operation is cloaked in a silence as deep as the void it seeks to study. There are no live broadcasts, no daily press briefings. The data will be collected over weeks, analyzed over months, debated over years. The world will have to be patient, just like the mountain, but the sense of anticipation is a palpable force. It is the feeling that history is holding its breath. Behind that last door lies the answer to the question that has haunted humanity since we first realized the pyramid was hollow. What did the builders consider so important that they hid it away with more care than they lavished on the king's own burial chamber? We are no longer guessing. We are preparing to ask the dark directly and to listen for the echo of its truth. The last door is not made of stone. It is made of time, and we are finally learning how to knock. The thread, a whisper of modern ingenuity, passed through the stone and into the silence. For days it inched forward, a blind worm in the dark, tasting and feeling. In a sterile control room far from the Giza plateau, screens displayed streams of data, not images, but graphs and spectral readouts. The vital signs of a space that had known no change since the dawn of civilization. Then the data spoke. The ancient air, sampled molecule by molecule, told its first story. It was dry, incredibly so, with an oxygen content slightly lower than the modern atmosphere, a snapshot of a different age. But it was the other signatures that made the scientists lean in, their hearts beating a rhythm against the quiet hum of machines. There were traces of organic compounds, not the overwhelming signal of a burial, but faint, complex signatures. Analysis suggested the presence of degraded plant resins, myrrh or frankincense. There were lipids consistent with ancient beeswax, often used in seals or rituals. Most intriguingly, there were elevated levels of specific calcium and sulfur compounds that suggested not just stone, but plaster, a prepared surface. The air itself hinted that the walls of the hidden void might have been finished, perhaps even painted, and that ceremonial substances had been present. Their essence evaporated over millennia, but their chemical ghost still haunting the still air. The atomic force sensor told a parallel tale. As it traced the wall of the north face corridor, it detected a uniformity that spoke of meticulous craftsmanship. But at the threshold to the larger void, the texture changed. The data stream showed a pattern of minute, regular grooves, followed by a surface of exceptional smoothness. The grooves matched, at a tiny scale, the tool marks expected from a specific type of copper saw used with an abrasive sand. The smoothness that followed suggested polishing. This was not a rough construction gap. It was a finished space, worked to a fine degree. Then the sensor encountered an anomaly, a series of raised points arranged not randomly, but in a distinct, repeating geometric pattern over a small area. It was the faintest of bas-reliefs, or perhaps the impressions left by a tool used to apply a seal or a decorative element. Patterns worn nearly flat by time, but still detectable to a probe feeling at the atomic level. The data painted a picture, not of a treasure vault, but of a sanctuary. A finished, sealed chamber accessed by a precise corridor, its air once scented with sacred resins, its walls perhaps adorned. The absence of any significant metallic signatures argued against stored treasure in the conventional sense. The absence of organic decay signals associated with a body argued against a hidden burial. What emerged was the profile of a sacred space, a serdab on a colossal scale. In Egyptian tombs, a serdab was a sealed statue chamber where the Ka, the life force of the deceased, could reside. This void appeared to be a serdab not for a statue, but for an idea, for a process, for the divine essence of the king's journey itself. The breath of the ancients, analyzed and decoded, shifted the paradigm entirely. The question was no longer what treasure is inside. It became, what ritual function did this perfected, hidden geometry perform? The chamber was not an archive of things, but a catalyst for transformation. The builders had built a room not for the physical self, nor for the spiritual self as they understood it, but for the moment of transition between the two. It was the locked chamber where the magic happened, where the formulas whispered in the king's chamber below were amplified and realized in the unseen realm. This discovery, though made without a single visual image, was perhaps more revolutionary than any artifact. It proved the hidden spaces were ritually significant, finished to a high standard and intentionally isolated from the world. The mountain had not just a skeleton of chambers, but a hidden nervous system, a sealed component of its spiritual circuitry. The breath from the dark told us the pyramid was alive with intention. It was not a tomb, but a machine with a hidden engine, and we had just sampled the exhaust of its eternal, silent running. The awe in the control room was palpable. They had not seen the chamber, but they had heard its breath, felt its skin. They had, in the most intimate way possible without sight, stood in the dark with the ancients and felt the weight of their sacred purpose. The mystery had deepened, but it had also come into focus. The void had a soul. The indirect sensing was a triumph, but it was a portrait painted with shadows. The chemical whispers and tactile hints demanded confirmation. The world yearned to see, yet the covenant of minimal invasion held. The solution emerged from an inspired fusion of the old and the new. The mission planners turned back to the muons. By deploying an array of ultra-sensitive muon emulsion detectors inside the north face corridor itself, threaded through the same tiny access, they could capture muons passing through the final barrier of stone from within the pyramid's own body. This internal vantage point would provide a muograph of the big void with unprecedented clarity, a negative image of the space developed by the universe's own radioactive particles. For months, the plates silently collected cosmic signatures. Then they were developed. The resulting image was not a photograph. It was a grainy, ghostly point cloud, a silhouette of emptiness. But to trained eyes, it was a revelation. The big void was confirmed as a grand, corbelled corridor, a twin to the grand gallery in form and scale, running exactly parallel above it. But at its far end, the muon shadow revealed something new, a terminus. The corridor did not simply taper or stop. It ended in a distinct, squared form. The data suggested a chamber. Not a large one, perhaps the size of the Queen's chamber, sitting at the end of this hidden gallery like a sacred cell at the end of a processional way. The configuration was now breathtakingly clear. The known pyramid offered a journey, down into the earth the descending passage, then a choice upward the ascending passage, through the soaring grand gallery to the transformation of the king's chamber. But above this, hidden like a sacred overlay, was a parallel mirrored journey. It began at the secret door behind the chevrons, the north face corridor, led into the hidden grand gallery, the big void, and culminated in a sealed private chamber. It was a duplicate pathway, a spiritual bypass for the divine aspect of the pharaoh. The known route was for the mortal remains and the Ba soul. The hidden route was for the Ak, the glorified, stellar spirit, traveling a purified, unseen track to its own exclusive sanctum. This architectural revelation redefined everything. The pyramid was not a single-purpose tomb. It was a duplex of destiny with two complete parallel routes to resurrection, one earthly and accessible, one celestial and sealed. The hidden chamber at the end of the void was not a storage room, it was the destination. The final stopping point on the star map. What was in that chamber? The muons could not say. Its size and shape suggested it could hold a statue, a sacred symbol, or simply be an empty vessel awaiting the perfected spirit. Perhaps it contained the king's living statue, his eternal body for the afterlife, too potent to be placed with the mortal remains below. Perhaps it held a meteorite, a piece of the imperishable northern stars. Or perhaps, as the chemical air analysis hinted, it was an anointed, painted chamber whose power was purely in its form and consecration. The emotional impact of this discovery was profound but quiet. There was no gold, no ark, no library. Instead, there was genius, a theological and architectural genius of staggering ambition. The builders had engineered a double resurrection, ensuring the king's passage on two parallel planes of existence. They had hidden the more important one. This explained the stark emptiness of the known chambers. The real furniture of eternity was upstairs in the locked apartment. The revelation also answered the haunting why of the pyramid's immense effort. It was not just to house a body for eternity. It was to architect a guaranteed ascension with a backup system, an inner sanctum so secure that not even the elements of time could corrupt its function. The hidden chambers were the ultimate insurance policy on immortality. This understanding brought a strange closure. The Great Pyramid's secret was now known, even if the final chamber's content was not. Its secret was its duality. It was a machine with two outputs, and we had finally found the hidden exhaust port. The world now looked at the pyramid with new eyes. It was no longer a riddle of a single purpose, but a revealed masterpiece of layered intent. The known path was for history. The hidden path was for the cosmos. The patient mountain had finally shown us its blueprint, not for its stones, but for its soul. The revelation was not in what was seen, but in what was understood. The ancient mind did not just build for death, but for a precise, meticulously engineered afterlife, with a sealed, sacred workshop where the final, divine assembly took place. The dark had given up its greatest secret, the map of a journey we are only beginning to comprehend.